And at 10, Henry is the purple guy. We all know that in the canon FNAF universe, the individual known as the purple guy is William Afton. However, what if he wasn't? What if everything we knew about the FNAF world was the same, except that Henry Emily was the killer? This would be pretty messed up, considering how his first victim would have been his own daughter instead of his business partner's daughter. And I don't think that you need to be told why that's worse than the original idea. But then again, I need to make sure that this video is long enough so that it doesn't get buried by the algorithm. So yeah, if Henry was the killer, who would be his Henry? I guess maybe William, but we don't know how he'd react. Keep in mind that on this Earth, simply the identity of Purple Guy changes, nothing else. Meaning that William's sadistic killer tendencies and mind would stay the same. So William wouldn't really try and stop Henry, resulting in Henry probably killing for years and years. Which means a Springtrap running around for as long as he can, since he wouldn't really get caught in a fire that would burn away his remnant. Oh god. And at 9, I am the purple guy. What's scarier than Henry being the one who kills his daughter? Me being the one who kills his daughter. Or just the one known as purple guy. Because if I've learned one thing, and one thing only from this series, it's that William is as stupid as they come. Sure, he didn't get officially caught because they had a lack of evidence, but everyone knows that William is to blame for the missing children. Especially since in Sister Location, we see him being interviewed about secret features contained inside the baby animatronic. Like, this man hid his victims in robots that would be on display daily. That's a horrible idea. Yet somehow, when those robots started leaking blood and smelling like dead bodies, the police still never found the bodies. Like, if that was me, Henry wouldn't even know what hit him. Like, there would be no Henry to stop me because they wouldn't think that it was me. Killing people in a place you own? Horrible idea. Look at what it did to the business. Go to your competitors and do it there. That's the real way to get some work done. And at 8, Chica's Chicken. What if instead of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Chica was the star of the show? Firstly, it would result in my mommy getting a little too much attention, and I don't like that. But the place would most likely be called Chica's Chicken. Why is this scary, you ask, when we're just changing the main mascot? Well, Chica's Chicken is actually a real location in Toronto at the corner of Dundas West and Keele. And if Chica's Chicken was actually a FNAF location, I would be screwed. This place actually looks really good though, and I would go there, except my job. And the fact that I talk about FNAF all day makes me kind of want to avoid this place as much as I possibly can, but I don't know. Maybe if I can Uber Eats it, I'll do that. You may not think this is scary, but to me, this is terrifying. And at 7, the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is a phrase I'm sure you've all heard before. But what it's really talking about is the effects that one action can have on everyone else. Step on a butterfly and it doesn't land on a certain flower. So someone picks that flower up instead of another. That flower then is given to their partner and an allergic reaction happens and they get rushed to the hospital. They die from the reaction and their kids aren't born, but also since they're taking up the room, someone else doesn't get in because the hospital is full, etc. Imagine this in like the FNAF universe and you'll have one of the most horrific experiences of your life. Imagine the last scenario, but the one who doesn't get into the hospital is William and his wife, who for the sake of this experiment had just gotten into an accident with Henry. She doesn't get into the hospital and all of a sudden his first kill isn't to get back at the man who killed his wife, but the hospital who couldn't let them in. And then boom, the entire world changes. That's kind of crazy when you think about it, isn't it? And at 6, Age of Afton. So I think at least most of us know about the MCU, aka the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with movies like Age of Ultron. However, what if the FNAF verse had its own Age of Ultron and instead called it Age of Afton, where instead of Ultron taking over, as he does in the comic storyline at least, we actually see Afton as Springtrap take over. At that point, he was augmented by a robotic endoskeleton, even if it was poking through his flesh, and he was being kept alive by the soul of one of his victims. So honestly, it's not that much of a stretch to assume that he could have taken over the universe. All he really needed was to get Henry out of the picture and we'd all be ripe for the picking. Since Henry was the only one who knew about William and about how you had to burn Remnant in order to kill it off and how he had Remnant in his body. I mean, like, maybe the Winchesters might have burnt him, but this isn't supernatural, okay? I'm trying to be realistic here. The only person and potentially leader of a resistance or something would be Michael, who could learn how to destroy Remnant from Baby or just by understanding it himself since he's kind of using it himself. Halfway through into number 5, our universe. What if FNAF was in our universe? And not like Chica's Chicken, like an actual FNAF restaurant, like straight up Five Nights at Freddy's being in our world. Honestly, technically speaking, it could be. The story of FNAF could be real and we just don't know it. Sure, there haven't been fires at Chuck E. Cheese, but what if there's like an immortal serial killer who someone keeps trying to take down with various fires so that they can't come back? Honestly, at this point, I'd believe it. What if the FNAF story is truly taking place in this world and that's where Scott Drew his inspiration. That would be the most horrifying thing. I mean, like, we all thought that the phone guy was Purple Guy for a while, and since Scott voices the phone guy, were we right all along? Oh god, could Five Nights at Freddy's be inspired by actual events? I shudder at the thought. And the thought that they'd probably recruit me to solve the mystery if it is. They'd also recruit Matt, Pat, and Doggo, so like, they wouldn't be able to deny my existence any longer, so I don't know, maybe there would be an upside. And at 4, supernatural. Get it? What if there was nothing supernatural going on in FNAF, and instead it was just an intense story about a serial killer? That would be terrifying. It's actually ironic that the animatronics getting possessed actually makes this story less scary, since it becomes less realistic at that point. It's like the same concept with crime shows. The idea that this killer could be a real thing is really what makes these shows so unsettling. FNAF isn't like that. It's more of a fantasy. Not because we want it to be real, well, some of us do, based on comments of previous videos. A little too much, actually. But having this just be a series about tracking down a serial killer who was going from pizza joint to pizza joint offing kids would have certainly made for a just as unsettling game, if not more, putting aside the deep-seated issues that the comments section has. Getting close to the end in number 3, Henry was first. One of the ideas that really scares me about FNAF is what if William was just getting away with it forever? And honestly, he actually could have. If he wasn't so much of a little and actually tried to kill someone his own size, he could have gotten rid of the one person who ruined his whole plan, Henry. If William had just offed the only man who knew his true intentions, nobody would have been the wiser, and everything would have ended up in his favor. No fires in FNAF 3 or 6. Nobody to call the cops on you and get you arrested. Especially the whole FNAF 6 thing, because, you know, that's what made you have to let yourself die, since you didn't have the robotic suit keeping you moving. It honestly could have just been a flawless victory if you had just killed Henry instead of his kid, or just both of them. Use a gun. You're in the States. You can get one easily. Just go to Walmart, get one, shoot him, and then store the gun in an animatronic, and then you're good. You can still keep your MO of storing things in animatronic. I mean, like, it might have made you more suspicious, but if they won't arrest you because they couldn't find the kids' bodies, then they won't arrest you based on irony. Motive means an opportunity. And would you really have a motive to kill Henry? I mean, like, maybe you did, but that's a whole other can of worms. Penultimately, in at number 2, 34. Ah, yes, the rules of the internet. One of the most famous ones being Rule 34. The rule that no matter what is online, there will always be some not safe for work or not safe for YouTube version. But what about the universe where the entirety of FNAF is just not safe for work? I mean, we've seen things like it with the Five Nights in Anime game, like big boobed animatronic characters staring flirtatiously at the camera. This kind of thing isn't new. But the universe where that's all that FNAF's purpose was is probably one of the scariest Earths there is. It's not scary at a typical sense, hence why it's only number 2, but hot damn are there a load of possibilities with this kind of thing. Imagine Matt Pat having to make a deep diving lore video about these games if they were just meant to be Rule 34 oriented. That would have been one of the most interesting, comedic, and concerning YouTube videos of all time. Next thing you know, he's gonna start theorizing about the canonicity of Rick and Morty Away Back Home, which actually sounds scarily similar to Spider-Man No Way Home. And finally, in at number 1, it's real. Now I talked about what if FNAF was in our universe, but I never talked about what if the events of the games in full were actually real. Like if the universe we lived in was exactly FNAF. I think I kind of answered this in the what if FNAF was real video, and honestly that kind of terrifies me. But like in the conclusion of that video, I said that William would most likely have been caught. But if the world of FNAF was actually the same as ours, he wouldn't have been caught because he didn't get caught in the game. Which would mean that if the world of FNAF was totally real, we'd all be screwed. Because you know what happens to background characters in horror games, okay? Plus, I think that it's funny that Matt Pat still exists in both realities, just thanks to one line from a Fazbear Fright story where someone says like, a game theory, just like his favorite YouTuber, or something along those lines. That's what the line says, something like that. Or at least game theory was real. I like to think that if we all had our own roles in the FNAF universe, that Matt Pat would be like a detective, but I don't know who I'd be. Let me know who you think I'd be in a real FNAF down below. And so help me, if you say purple guy, I will make that real just for you.
Number 10. What if Circus Baby remained at large? What if Circus Baby remained free after she escaped that first time? What if she was never apprehended and brought back to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, the sister location? This would mean no closure for Michael or for Elizabeth, but it would also mean another killer in our midst that could be anywhere and possibly could be disguised as anyone. In the Fazbear Frights books, it suggested that the pins sticking out of Baby are used to recalibrate her appearance, allowing her to drastically shapeshift and look human-like. We also learn in this story that this type of animatronic can potentially steal another person's skin and wear it as her own, making herself look just like them and taking their place. I like to imagine that in this alternate timeline where Circus Baby simply continues in our world, that she ends up becoming a deadly assassin who decides, after doing some killing for fun, to make use of her gifts and kill for sport and for fortune, allowing her to raise enough money to buy the other animatronics while in disguise herself and then free them, possibly creating much more havoc in the world, unleashing them on humankind, or simply saving them and helping them to find new and meaningful lives in the human world, which admittedly would be less scary but would also be kind of a cool story that I think might be cute. You can tell I'm a Circus Baby fan. I'm like, she's not that evil, guys. Number 9. What if the bodies were found? I mean, this one would definitely change the entire course of the franchise. What if William Afton didn't manage to evade the police but instead was caught by them? And what if in this reality he didn't get away from the police due to lack of substantial evidence? What if the bodies of the missing children were found and retrieved and we were able to link them to Afton? Well then, in theory, he would be put away forever. But then comes the hypothetical theory that we already have in these games. Would the world be changed in the games? Would there be no more murder, or would we simply just have a playable world that exists only in a dream? That's right, we're going to dream theory, as some have theorized before. If this was what happens, it may just solidify that dream theory so the games would remain the same, but all end up being dreams or hallucinations of William, whose guilt over what he has done has driven him insane. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you love this list and you want more sort of what if versions of FNAF where we explore what if things went differently, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, let us know your what if suggestions in the comments below. I want to hear your theories on how the world could be forever changed. Number 8. What if Phone Guy was revealed? I think this one could be potentially really terrifying. In the first FNAF game, we never find Phone Guy's body, but it is definitely implied that the animatronics got him on his final night at Freddy's and killed him. What if instead of us never really learning who did the killing or learning exactly what happened to him, we did find out, because he survived. I like to think, as positive as this may sound, it may just mean that we were in more danger as a result of that. If Phone Guy managed to evade the animatronics or was simply being kept as their prisoner, who knows what state he might be in when we found him. If he lived, he might have been driven insane by the traumatic experience, or have been partly mangled or stuffed inside the suit. Partly or fully stuffed inside the suit. Ugh. A horrible sight to think about. Phone Guy himself might go on to become a murderer and join William Afton after the experience he suffered at the hands of Freddy and his friends. Or he may have had to make a deal with the animatronics to join them, so might just have more killers on the loose? Yikes. Number 7. What if Clara Afton was the real mastermind? What if Clara had been there all along and we just didn't know it? Perhaps there is another timeline where William is not the mastermind behind this whole thing, but just a front for the real villain, his wife, Clara Afton, or Mrs. Afton if you will. We don't really know her name yet, or if she's even real at this point in the franchise, but in this reality, it is Clara, and she is, because guess what? I get to decide what this what if is like. So I'm gonna go with Clara Afton. Clara actually faked her own death or disappearance to protect herself, as she made William do her dirty work. She is the one who truly seeks immortality in this alternate timeline, and William was just forced to act as her puppet, enslaved by her and still tragically in love with her, I like to imagine. Perhaps he stays for a chance to try and save his children, and it's Clara who is willing to risk them for her own mad experiments. Perhaps William himself in this reality becomes one of her twisted experiments, becoming her own personal murderous animatronic that she controls, bending him to her will. I already like this idea of like a really dark Mrs. Afton. I feel like it's a cool, invented character from my mind. I want fan art. I want fan art of evil Mrs. Afton. Number 6. What if Vanny didn't join William? There are a few things I think could happen in this scenario, but I think the scariest alternate timeline version when it comes to this scenario is that instead of joining William, Vanny decided to strike out on her own, abandoning him in an attempt to be an even better killer than her former master ever was. Perhaps in the end she didn't like William's style, or she didn't like being bossed around. This caused a rift between the two and inspired Vanny to strike out on her own, replacing William and becoming an even more sadistic killer than he was, because she had something to prove. Instead of mad science driving her, Vanny is actually driven by a sense of ambition and bloodlust in this reality. She becomes a passionate killer, and that becomes her main motive and focus as an antagonist, moving this version of the franchise into an even more horrifying place, because Vanny can't even be reasoned with, and she also can't be controlled here. Number 5. What if Henry was Mustard Man, or Yellow Guy? What if this character from Midnight Motorist was actually Henry? This is a theory flying around, but it hasn't technically been confirmed as true, so we ask the question, what if it was true? Well, this would paint Henry in a bit of a darker light, as he seems quite violent and volatile here. We've been led to believe for the most part that Henry kinda was the good guy of this duo, and William was the bad guy. But what if we were wrong? What if Henry at least started out as bad? It doesn't change too much for the world, I don't think, but it does change our perspective and could mean that Henry shows up again in the franchise as a villain as opposed to a savior in this alternate timeline. It would also mean that he potentially has another child out there, at least one more, a son. I mean, what would Henry's son be like in this alternate timeline? I don't know, but I want to find out. Number 4. What if Henry was the villain? What if the roles were reversed, or what if it was all revealed that Henry himself was the villain the whole time, and William was merely a pawn? Now that could change the way we see William entirely in this world. Or what if just the roles there were directly reversed, with William being the wronged party and Henry being the one behind all the murders? Perhaps instead of William being potentially involved in the death of Charlie, Henry's daughter, Henry was the one who took out Elizabeth. In this world, William, however, does not fight against Henry alone, but instead is joined by his son Michael Afton wholeheartedly, who attempts to infiltrate Freddy's and its fellow franchises and destroy Henry while freeing his sister. Then the Afton family would be like this neat unit, and they'd be like, "We're gonna take you on, Henry." That would be pretty cool. Number 3. What if William escaped the ghosts? This would be pretty scary because it would mean that there wasn't much justice served here. It would also mean that William got to remain at large for longer and could more easily prey on his victims, without being spring-locked and then just turned into an immortal corpse in an animatronic. I'm not sure which one is more scary though, because both of these realities are obviously pretty terrifying. Both realities are just not great. However, it could also mean that the spirits haunting the animatronics become more angry in this alternate timeline, more vengeful, and even left Freddy's to go prey on people outside of the restaurants. After all, being robbed of the justice you deserve would be pretty awful, and it might make you more murderous in response. If that were the case, we'd have a more unchained version of William and a more motivated group of murderous animatronics. Oh my. Number 2. What if Clara Afton never left William? If Mrs. Afton never left William or died, would he still have become a killer? In this alternate timeline coming to you straight from my brain, I like to imagine he would have still been a killer, but that her presence would make him have to be more sneaky. William in this world didn't want his wife to know what he was up to because he didn't want to lose her, and so was more secretive with his killings, allowing them to go more unnoticed. There were no major massacres, but the Freddy's franchises continued to thrive uninhibited, with it still being used as William's very selective hunting ground. In this reality, William doesn't seek immortality but stumbles upon its secrets instead. Eventually, he finds a way to immortalize the part of his consciousness that loves to kill in an animatronic, separating this part of his psyche from himself so that he can continue to kill without getting in the way of his family life. His animatronic self becomes an unstoppable and murderous shadow animatronic version of himself. I don't know why I imagine a shadow animatronic for this, but that's just go with me here. And his organic self continues to run the business and support his family, all while knowing that his other half gets to kill indiscriminately, with no one knowing or ever finding out the truth, because obviously they can't pin it on him because he's got an alibi. There's two Williams. Number 1. What if there was no possession? What if FNAF was a world where instead of having possession and remnants with a possible drive for immortality causing pretty much all this terror, there was none of that? What if possessing an animatronic just wasn't a thing? Instead, in this alternate timeline, when people die, they die. William is just a ruthless killer who likes stuffing victims into animatronics to hide them, and not for any other purpose. He isn't pushing towards anything, and the animatronics aren't driven to avenge their deaths, but instead are just mindless killing machines programmed by William to be that way because, well, he just loves killing so much. These murderous machines in Afton cannot be reasoned with, much like the reality where Vanny reigns supreme in terms of evil villains. Instead, the only option you have is to try and escape. And we all know that's probably not going to go well if everyone's just out for murder.